This episode of the Seventh Valkyrie Podcast is brought to you entirely by fan support. To help keep the series ad-free, get early access and bonus features, browse gear and apparel, join the community, or watch the series come to life in living color, you can check out the links in the description.
Well, hey, what's up with Valkyrie fans? It's time for Wagga in the Brain. Woo!
Yeah, that's what it would be if I was like a 90s morning show. I told you guys I tend to record these in batches, and I just get weirder and weirder as the episodes go on. So you can tell. Maybe next time I'll mix them up so you hear one psycho one, and then immediately afterward it's like, hi everybody, let's talk about the Seventh Valkyrie Podcast, and you're like, these are out of order. Anyway, I won't. Maybe my next batch. Anyway, what I'm actually here for is like a weird, I don't know, like productivity tip / like living your life more wholly tip that I have. Sometimes I have these where they're just kind of like little things that I do in my life that, like, when I mention them to people, they're like, oh, it's kind of a good idea. So I'm like, I should make a podcast out of that. And they're like, stop mocking me. I'm like, I'll stop. Anyway, yeah. What was I going to say? Try doing less and you might do more, is my random weird productivity tip. And there's a reason for this. So for some context, this is a weird thought I had like yesterday. Maybe not yesterday. I've been working on wait, no. This is something that I've been studying and paying attention to over the course of the past 18 years. And after 18 years, I've come to an epiphany. But yeah, no. So, like, as you guys know, I mentioned it. My girlfriend's heading to New York for a few weeks, and I'm trying to, like, as you know from the past two podcasts, like, I'm really trying to crank the Seventh Valkyrie. But that has got me thinking about productivity. We all have some form of productivity challenge in our life. I know I always do. But, like, regardless of whether you're working, whether you're doing personal projects, whether you're a baby, whether you're a grandpa, everyone has something that they want to work on. And I guess, but particularly working adults, and, people in school. I have gone through many iterations of, like, work schedules to try and, like, and especially once you get to college, you can kind of, like, set stuff up. And even within work, like, people kind of set up their work schedule different ways. But most importantly, I think, or one thing I realized is I've gone through very, very many ambitious work schedules. I have worked I went to Georgia Tech and did, like, way too much. And then I went to Las Catalinas and it was a very intense work environment. And then I kind of got out. And then even when I had my opportunity to set my own schedule, it was still a very intense work environment. And I was always like, I could be putting out 50 hours a week and other people should. And it was kind of this weird should storm of, like, hey, like, everybody else is doing more work than you. And so when you're kind of pushing that line, maybe this happens to you. Like, you kind of squeeze in a few more to-dos into the day, or you just throw yourself into work being like, I'll just take it all down. And it's hard, it's kind of hard to keep your mindset up. And especially at the end of, like, and maybe you hit it for one day, or maybe you hit it for 2 days, but then you get to day 3 or day 4 or the end of the week, and you haven't hit those lofty targets, and you're feeling lame, and they are piling up. So you've got to reschedule, and then things get pushed, and then all those things that are getting pushed kind of becomes this little pieces. For me, they become these little pieces of junk in the back of your mind. Like, they're just hanging there, and you're like, frick, I didn't get it done when I had the energy to do it, and now it's like a weight, and it'll just add up and add up and add up. And, like, sometimes Seventh Valkyrie stuff happens here. Like, I was like, I didn't have a chance to do art when I wanted to do it, and then it's like, I've got to do art, and it becomes this, like, little meep, and it's just, like, sitting there on my task list, like, hey there, baby, don't you wish you could come do some AI-generated art? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I've got to do, like, day job stuff. And the Seventh Valkyrie's like, that's fine, I'll just be really mean to you. And that's kind of my mental dialogue. So if that specific problem doesn't happen to you, like you imagine your work talking to you and being like, hey, you're in like a breathy French-inspired voice, I guess that was. I don't know what that was. It was certainly saucy. And if the general problem of like, hey, like being too ambitious with your work schedule also doesn't happen to you, then great. But it happens to me all the time. And I don't know that I'd call myself a highly productive person, like especially in the way that some people are. Like my buddy Scotty is a highly productive individual. Like he can just go and chug on work, and I can't do that. I've kind of like peaks and valleys of productivity, and everyone's different. And I'd call myself a very lazy person, not a very highly productive person. Like I have to really work to want to work, and what comes from that is I do find some clever ways to avoid doing work. Like they always say, like if you need something done, ask a busy person. And I always say, and then in coding, they always say, hey, like if you want something done fast, ask a lazy coder, because because lazy coders will always find a way to create it in a more clever, organized way, because nobody wants to do work. I was a lazy coder when I was at Georgia Tech, and so from a person who can at times be perceived as highly productive, but who is absolutely so lazy, here is a tip, which is just try to get a little bit less done. And obviously, from everybody, that's not possible. Like if you have a job and you have deadlines to hit, like you got to get that done. But if you're just kind of going through your daily life, my recommendation is, and you don't have, and this might not work for you, but it was just try to do a little bit less in the day. Like be realistic about what you actually will get done, and give yourself some wiggle room to rest, to relax, to save the moment. To savor the moment. And focus on doing the work that you are going to get done as well as possible. Like I noticed that I started doing that, and immediately it was like, oh, cool. I had some time to transition into tasks and get more wholly into something. At the end of literally today, it was like I'm kind of still working on adding this process to me, to end my schedule. But it's like, hey, I've got this thing and I've got a chunk of time, and I was like, will I really have the energy to do podcasts? And I took like a moment, I jumped in the pool, and it was like, all right, like let's go. And I hope these past few podcasts, it's been apparent that I have a lot of energy going on right now. But yeah, like, I don't know. It just like that. It kind of comes into the thing of like how you can just go from thing to thing to thing in the world today and like constantly be distracted. You don't have time for stillness. Maybe this is sort of a part 2 to that of like, hey, when you're trying to do stuff during the day, just try to do like a little bit less, because if you and maybe that's something that I should have learned from my fellow Ticos, 4 years ago. But like it's really cool when all of a sudden, rather than thinking about like every task as like a task on the sheet, it's like, wow, this is something important and enlightening and vital, to the, it doesn't have to be all three. Like there's some things that are just boring, but they're busy work, but they're vital to the work that you're doing, and you're building a foundation, and maybe it's laying bricks, metaphorically, and like you got to lay 1,000 bricks before you got a wall built. But then eventually that wall becomes, one of 4 walls of a beautiful home. A brick house. How? Anyway, so with all that focus and all of that space that you're creating, and all of that brick house, like it comes like when you just feel a little, and this could be that in 3 weeks I'm telling you guys something completely opposite, or I guess it'll be longer. But I don't know. I just wanted to share something because I noticed it amongst myself, and it is like I notice like, oh wow, like when I take when I'm a little bit less ambitious, and it's such a shitty like thing to it's like, oh, like you should shoot for your dreams, but you shouldn't shoot too hard. And that's not what I'm trying to say. It's more of like, hey, like give yourself the grace within the day to do everything you're doing really well, as opposed to just like checking off the numbers on the sheet. And I think that if you give that little extra time and you take 1 or 2 items off, all of a sudden that little build up, all of a sudden that little, on a logistical perspective, like you actually hit your targets, which is in and of itself valuable, like that little dopamine hit of like, oh, I did something. But more importantly, I've noticed that I've started to savor like each piece of work and actually appreciate it as a chance to do something. So anyway, I'll let you guys know if over the course of the next 3 weeks that becomes like a really strong, amazing personal tenet, or if I'm just talking out of my ass. So we'll keep you guys posted, but hey, give the tip a try. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Seventh Valkyrie Podcast, which is brought to you entirely by fan support. To help keep the series ad-free, get early access and bonus features, browse gear and apparel, join the community, or watch the series come to life in living color, you can check out the links in the description.